Now, we have a very busy agenda this morning, and we have some goals for all of you. The first goal, and the major goal, is to really let you know all about ARPA-H, how it came about, and what its mission is. Then the second goal will be to learn more about GLIDE, and I'll have the opportunity to go through some of the major highlights in the solicitation that you'll find online. And what we want to see is that you're able to form the best and most comprehensive teams, because we have a hard problem here to solve. The third thing that we're going to do today is understand more about the process of ARPA-H. And we have our agreements officer here today, which I'm really privileged to have, so she can explain a little more about how ARPA-H does business. And that's different than grants, and I'll let her take it away. And then finally today, what I thought was really important to bring into the picture is patient engagement and how we bring patients into our science. Patients need to lead. They are rich with all of the information because they are the consumers, as are the providers and the people using their technology. And without them, our technology may sit on the shelf. So we don't want to do that. We want to bring them in early. And I'm going to share with you today our program to do that. Many of you may know LIGHT, the first program that was launched, lymphatic imaging, genotyping, and phenotyping technologies, which is all focused on diagnostics, and now GLIDE. And together, we'll talk about the fact that we've launched these in parallel very quickly for a very good reason, so that they run in parallel but cross-pollinate, and that we collaborate and we learn our findings from diagnostics, and that can inform our therapeutics and vice versa. Once we are finished with our overview of me talking, I'm going to bring up Dr. Amy Jenkins, who will share everything about ARPA-H. And then we will talk about contracting. And then we're going to head into our Discovery Duo program and our community engagement research and learnings from a parent and also a patient. And then we're going to hear from some experts in the field and how we can engage the patients and think about affordability, accessibility, and inclusivity. So, without further ado, my privilege to announce the director of Health Science Futures Mission Office, and my boss and leader, Dr. Amy Jenkins. She listened. She heard the importance of the lymphatic system. She heard that we don't have a really great ecosystem yet, but she's willing for us and take a bet on us to try. And I know, having been in the community now for over 9 years, we can do it. We just haven't tried. So Dr. Amy Jenkins comes from DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, where she was a program manager in the Biological Technology Office. And she had some really cool programs, including novel platforms to combat infectious diseases. She has a doctorate in chemistry and chemical biology. And man, what an incredible leader that I've learned so much from already. Thank you. So, Amy.
Hi, good morning, everybody. As you heard from Kimberly, I spent nearly 10 years at DARPA. At DARPA, we get to do a lot of cool things. We get to go on aircraft carriers and fighter jets and see a lot of cool stuff. This is the coolest venue we have ever had for a Proposers Day. So kudos to the team that planned this. This is awesome. Thank you to our gracious hosts, and this is really a lovely venue. So I'm very excited today to tell you about ARPA-H, why we stood up the agency, what we're all about, and hopefully inspire you to become part of our team. Okay, so the mission. So President Biden stood up ARPA-H back in the spring of 2022. And he stood ARPA-H up in the model of DARPA. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that actually means in a few minutes. But as you can see here, a quote from the president, that idea is so audacious that people say we just might work only if we try. So many of the things that we're going to do here, they may not work, but we're going to try and we're going to let you try. And we want you to try to achieve these goals. We have a singular mission at ARPA-H, and that mission is to accelerate better health outcomes for everyone. So as I mentioned, that we were stood up in the image of DARPA. So what does that mean? So many of you in the room may not know anything about DARPA. DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And DARPA was launched in 1958 in response to the launch of the Sputnik satellite. Sputnik went up, people panicked, and President Eisenhower said, the US will never again be surprised. I am going to stand up an organization within the Department of Defense that is going to create and prevent strategic surprise. And when I came to DARPA back in the early 2010s, I said, what does that mean? How do you create surprise? And it became very quickly apparent what we mean by creating surprise. And that's what we're going to do for healthcare realm as well. We're going to invest in things that are very out there. We're going to do it in a different business model that you'll hear about today and that I'll talk about a little bit. And we're going to try to make revolutionary leaps. And so that's what DARPA has done for national security. They have made pivotal, focused investments. There's no success that's just a paper. Papers are great, but that's not the goal of these agencies. The goal of an ARPA is to make a capability, to have a capability at the end. So as you can see over here, some pictures, some of them you may know what they are, and some you probably have no idea. But this model led to the beginnings of the internet, or the ARPANET back then. Stealth technology, self-driving cars, and in the biological technologies office, we hit the accelerator on mRNA vaccines that ultimately led to our COVID-19 vaccines. A lot of things that aren't pictured here are things that didn't work, but that's okay, because when it does work, you really change the field entirely. And so that's what we're here to do, and that's what the president stood ARPA-H up for, to say, okay, if that model for the national security led to things like the internet and stealth technology and self-driving cars, what could we do if we apply that model to healthcare? And so that's what we're here to do. So how are we unique? What is that model? There's a couple things that set us apart from some other funding agencies. One thing is we are just a funding agency. We are a funding agency by design. We don't have any labs. We don't do the science. We have wonderful creative program managers that come out here and come up with these great ideas, and they say, I see this need, I want this thing. And then they go out to all of you. You are our innovators in this ecosystem to solve these problems. Our program managers bring us the ideas. I don't come up with the ideas. I don't tell the agency what we should fund. I don't tell the program managers what we should fund. What I say is, program managers, come, tell me what you think the problems are in the healthcare system today. If you have the right program idea, the right problem, and you're the right person, let's bring you here to solve this problem. So Kimberley came to us over a year ago now, well, 18 months ago, and said, hey, there's nothing in lymphatics. And I had about 5 doctors standing behind me, MDs, she is also one, but she wasn't with us yet, saying, she's right, there's nothing. We don't learn anything about the lymphatic system. And we believed her, and we brought her here to try to solve this big problem. And so the program managers, bring the ideas. It's a bottom-up organization. And then finally, we're seeking radical change. We're not looking for just the next increment, the next obvious step in the science. We want to take the leap. We're going to try to leap forward 10, 20 years here. Probably 30 years in lymphatics, frankly, is where we need to go. And we're going to try to make that leap. We may not hit it. We may fall a little short. But if we don't take that leap, we're going to just have another incremental change. And I don't think anybody wants that for a field that, from what I understand, is probably about 30 years behind where our colleagues are in the cardiovascular realm. So let's try to take that giant leap today. Some of the attributes around the agency that really allow us to do this is looking for that radical change. Our program managers have full autonomy. We don't do study sections. Kimberley makes the final decision. She has government reviewers that help her review all of the proposals and the abstracts that will come into the agency. She makes the decision. She brings the decision to me, and I say yes. The reason we do that is because we do not want to buy down risk. If you put 10 scientists in a room and you have them all read a proposal, they will pick it apart and say, this is the thing, these are all the things that we need to change. We don't want to necessarily do that. We want to fund some things that are very risky. We don't want to change the laws of physics, but we also want to fund things that are very risky. We want to bring that risk into this program. The final thing that I'll say is that there are term limits here. So we're always looking for new ideas. We're always looking for the next thing. 6 years from now, these programs will not be ARPA-H programs. They will end. There is no renewals. There's no grant renewals. There's no contract renewals here. Kimberly and myself, we all have term limits. So we have a 3-year limit with the possibility to re-up for an additional 3 years for a maximum of 6 years. And then all of the technical leadership and all of the program managers in this agency will leave. We do that on purpose. We want new ideas, new creative ideas, and new problems that we're going to solve always coming into this agency. I want to give a little bit of an overview of what it takes to get an ARPA-H program off the ground. I think that you may find this enlightening to understand where we are, and some of these programs you may be familiar with. So our program managers they come in with a very well-formulated program. They have come in on their job talk and their interview telling us what they think the problem is, but they spend an additional several months talking to the ecosystem, talking to the government funding ecosystem to make sure that we really know what's going on and to make sure that we're deduplicating any efforts that are occurring across the rest of the government. Then the program managers take their program. Once they get a yes from me, then they go to our agency director and they present a science and technology board. And that board is all of the technical leadership of the agency. And if that program is approved, then we're on this timeline. We release a call for proposals that we call an ISO. Here it's still listed BAA. We move fast. We've already changed that. But we release the ISOs, and then we conduct a proposers day. So as you all can see, that's where we are right now with GLIDE. Then abstracts will be due, proposals will be due at late dates that are laid out in the ISO. Then Kimberly and her team and all of the government reviewers will go into source selection for which teams are going to be chosen to perform on a program. And then finally, awards are negotiated and the program is kicked off. So as you can see, we have some programs. You don't know the names of the ones out there because they haven't been approved yet. We have programs in this entire life cycle right now. But I think this helps folks just kind of understand what our process is. I also want to highlight the little tiny numbers up underneath there, about 9 months from the beginning to the end of this process. So we do not have time. She does not have time. I do not have time. We're only here for a maximum of 6 years. We move quickly, and that's the intention here. And so we ask of you, if we start negotiations with you, we also ask you to please move quickly, answer our questions. Let's get this thing under contract. Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit more about the model. As I said, the program managers come up with the idea, they come up with the challenge, they put that challenge out to the community. We launched the program. The program will be launched, the teams that are chosen to perform on the program, which is what we call our awardees as performers. Typically, they will all be taking different approaches, different scientific and technical approaches to solve the problem, to solve that challenge. The reason we do that is to buy down risk. We know this is going to be risky. We know it is very likely that some of these approaches will not work. They were just so crazy. If they worked, it would have been a huge leap. Maybe it's not going to work. We're going to take the chance. But we're going to fund many different groups to take those chances. And some of those groups, it may not work and some may. But there will be multiple teams working towards the goals of this program. And typically those teams are large. As you all, I'm sure all of you have read the ISO so carefully, right? As you read the ISO, you may be reading it and saying, this is impossible. I can't do this. I don't, my lab alone can't do this. I would need all these other areas of expertise. That's why you're here today, is to find those other areas of expertise. If only you could wave a magic wand, find the magic wand results here in the room today. And so we do understand that when we launch our programs and then the teams start performing, some of the approaches may not work. We know they're not going to. This is not the kind of thing where it's like you got one shot and if you didn't make it work, you're out. It doesn't work like that. We know it's R&D. We recognize that. We have very flexible contracting capabilities here. You're going to hear from one of our agreements officers shortly. So we will kind of maneuver and change focus and use different approaches, bring on different approaches throughout the cycle of the program. But some just may not fall short. Some may only meet the goal 75%. That's still going to be a huge advance in the field. But some may actually fully reach the goals of the program. And in those cases, we want to ensure that those teams are able to what we call transition. Now, when I was at DARPA, that transition was easier. It wasn't perfect. But for the most part, we knew where our satellite was going. We knew where our missile was going. We did not make satellites or missiles in the Biological Technologies Office. So we still had a hard time in the Biological Technologies Office. But you knew it was going to the DoD in general. Here it's harder. There is no obvious partner that's going to take these things and make them live on. And where that obvious partner is most likely is in the commercial sector. And so we want to ensure that technologies are able to get out of the labs, if appropriate, into small companies. If they're already small companies, get that technology and the capability into the hands of healthcare providers and patients. And we take that transition part at the end of our programs for the successful efforts very seriously. And so we have our focus areas here at the agency. The Health Science Futures Office is why you all are here today. So Kimberly's a program manager in this office. And we are here to expand what's technically possible. So we are probably the earliest stage office and hopefully the most radical, making the largest leaps. We have several other offices that I won't talk through today, but I will mention the Project Accelerator Transition Innovation Office, or PATIO office. That is an entire office that was stood up to help with that previous problem I just talked about. How do I know that I got the IP protected? How do I know, like some of you may say, I don't know idea how to spin out a company. I don't know how to spin out a company, but we have folks in that office that will help us ensure that we can do that. Finally, just briefly, I do want to talk about the ideation process at ARPA-H. So most of our funding will go out through programs like this one that you're here for today, the GLIDE program. Occasionally, people will have people have great ideas all the time, but occasionally we will fund an idea that wasn't part of a program. And those are our projects. We do have open calls for proposals. So there are ways to come to us with your idea if they don't fit inside a program. But I would encourage you today, even if you say, oh, I'm not quite the perfect fit here, talk to your colleagues, because you may find that your technology is actually just the piece of the puzzle that they need. So as I mentioned, Health Science Futures office here at ARPA-H is the office in which we're aiming to expand what's technically possible. We want to develop innovative tools, technologies, and platforms that can really push the boundaries. So a lot of the things that we will do in this office don't exist today. I think GLIDE is a perfect example of this. When our agency director asks Dr. Steele, can you tell me some of the metrics, like what fold improvement are we going to get? Are we going to be 100 times better or 1,000 times better or 10,000 times better than the current state of the art? We point out to her that the current state of the art is 0. And we don't really have a way to make that number. You know, that's a thing that ARPAs love to do is put an X improvement on something, 100X, 1,000X. We're starting from 0 here. We really are going from 0 to 1, and that's what we're aiming to do in this office. I love this slide. It's actually a really big point of pride for me. I love to present it. So the agency, as I mentioned, was stood up in the spring of 2022. And we got our first director in the fall of 2022. And then in the spring of 23, I joined, a couple other office directors joined, and a couple program managers joined in February of 23. And in March of 23, we launched our first call for proposals. And then very shortly after that, we launched our first program, the NITRO program, out of the Health Science Futures office. Since that point, we have launched all of these programs, projects, initiatives, our Women's Health Sprint, projects that folks have come to us with up here on the right-hand side of the slide. Just so many great ideas, innovations that are coming out of the agency. If you look closely in here, I'll find it. There's the LIGHT program up there, so Kimberly's diagnostics program. GLIDE is already on the graphic. So moving very quickly to launch these programs and really fundamentally change the landscape and the health landscape. So very proud of this timeline. And at this time next year, we won't be able to get it on a slide. We probably won't even be able to get what we're doing in Health Science Futures on one side. So very exciting. And I'm really looking forward to welcoming all of you to the ARPA-H family as proposers, as potential performers. You are the people that are our innovation ecosystem, so welcome. I'd like to just give a little bit of a snapshot of some of the other efforts we have, just to give you a tiny flavor of the types of things that we're doing outside of the lymphatics realm. So obviously of LIGHT and GLIDE, but we also have a lot of different efforts. A couple I'll highlight here because they're very quick to highlight. Our first program in osteoarthritis. aims to eradicate osteoarthritis. We have a program in precision surgery. We have a program, the THEA program, aimed at transplanting human eyes and regenerating the retinal nerve. So as you can see, many of the things that we're trying to do throughout the agency are really pushing the boundaries of where the healthcare is today. We also have more programs, but we also have a lot of different projects that are coming into our agency. So these are ideas that people are bringing to us, and we will not always fund that method. So right now, the bulk of our funding, or for the previous year, the bulk of our funding was occurring through those ideas that people brought to us because we just didn't have the program managers. We've got 21 program managers now, more coming every day. The bulk of our programs and the bulk of our funding is going to come through these programs. So please take these proposers' days seriously and really think about how you can help solve these problems. These are some of the examples of some of the projects that did come into our agency, ways to miniaturize OCT for looking at your eyes, diagnostics or sensors for screening for cancer, lots of different novel methods that have come into this agency through the community to date. And we want to apply these types of technologies to these programs moving forward. And so with that, I'm going to leave. We're going to stop here. I'm going to welcome Kimberley back to the stage. But the last thing I do want to say is that you all are going to have a tendency today to want to talk to her. And you should. She's awesome, and this is her idea. But talk to each other too. Find each other, find that missing piece of the puzzle so that you can solve those problems in that ISO that she has released. Because what she wrote in that ISO, that's what she wants. She wants every word that's in there. She means it. You may read it and say, she can't possibly mean that. She means it. Please, she's thought very long and hard about this, as you all likely know. And so find the pieces of the puzzle that you need to solve this problem. And welcome, and thank you all.
Okay, all right. So this is the fun part, to talk about the program. We called it GLIDE, Groundbreaking Lymphatic Interventions and Drug Exploration. And the idea was to glide into the future with improved physical interventions and great therapeutics. So the question we posed: what if doctors were able to prevent and cure human disease by targeting the lymphatic system? Now, I love doing this. Many of you out here are lymphatic experts, but not everybody is. And the one thing that I learned very quickly as we navigated the healthcare system to understand my son's lymphatic disease was that the lymphatic system is so underappreciated. I didn't learn it in medical school well. In surgery, not much at all, except told to be careful. Watch out for it. You can't see it. And if you see the white, that's not good, right? That's the milky chyle. So I did not learn this until I was faced with having to learn it. Our circulatory system is more than just arteries and veins. We have lymphatics too that run in parallel. Every day, our heart pumps 5 liters per minute of oxygenated blood that carries nutrients to every single one of our cells and tissues in our body. It gets to it, It gets to it at the capillary level. 90% of that blood returns back to the heart to start all over again. It delivers the oxygen, it delivers its nutrients, and 90% gets back to the heart. But guess what? 10% does not. It leaks into the interstitial spaces, the space between the tissues. And it is only the lymphatics that are responsible for removing that 10% of the fluid. And yet, doctors aren't trained to know that. We give diuretics to get rid of the fluid, but the diuretics don't take care of that fluid between the cells. Why? It's the lymphatics' job. And if the lymphatics are not working properly, guess what happens? Our organs swell. Our heart, our liver, our kidney. Every organ has a lymphatic system. So once the lymph travels back through the lymphatic system, it gets interrogated by those lymph nodes that are really important as our safeguards, our security officers. And then it gets pumped back in to the venous system. And then it starts all over again. But again, imagine when that lymphatic system is not working properly. Well, what is so incredible as of late is that we are understanding the emerging importance of the lymphatic system for the first time. Not only is the lymphatic system responsible for primary lymphatic diseases, but so many common and rare diseases are now being understood to have underlying lymphatic dysfunction. And that ranges from the brain, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, all the way to the kidneys, heart failure, type 2 diabetes, and myself as an obesity specialist, the numerous patients that I saw daily with lymphedema, and yet I will share, I was not trained to treat those patients when they came in my office. So how did I come up with the concept? What is the program vision that I had to pitch to all my fellow colleagues here today? Well, we know now millions of Americans live with diseases driven by lymphatic dysfunction, both that are common and also rare diseases, which can be progressive and debilitating. And the only treatments that doctors have to offer right now is compression and some drugs that are really, really toxic. So, as a parent myself, when we were faced with the diagnosis, I was paralyzed for about 24 hours. And then I recognized I can't be. I got to get up and I got to figure this out. And so I went out and I spoke to many of you out there, many on the call with us today, some in the room. We wanted to hear what are the gaps, what are the challenges, and why in this day and age we are so behind in the lymphatic system. And then as a program manager, I had the privilege to do it even more. And what I learned is that there are 4 major challenges that we need to concentrate on. The first one is the most explored, and that one is obstruction. Obstruction of the lymphatic system causes abnormal flow. Just like arteries and veins, they can become obstructed, and then what happens? They dilate, and fluid leaks out and causes all kinds of problems. The next 3 challenges are not as well explored, but are important and ones that in GLIDE we want you to think about. The first one are leaky vessels. Leaky vessels could be arteries and veins. And then the lymphatic system is overwhelmed, having to deal with that extra fluid. There's also the lymphatic system, when those vessels become leaky. That's another problem. And then the next problem is contractility. You all that are aware, lymphatics pump, but they pump slowly, low flow, and it's challenging. And when they don't pump properly, or we don't have valves, it causes disease. And then the last one is abnormal lymphatic growth, something I'm well aware of with a child with a rare lymphatic disease. Well, in some cases, we want more lymphatics. In other cases, we want to slow those lymphatics down. And we got to figure out how to do it. And we're not there yet. So today, what do we have to offer our patients? We have compression, lifelong. If you ever had to wear them, they're painfully uncomfortable. They're expensive, not covered by insurance. And then we also have decompression. What does that mean? Removing the obstruction, bypassing the obstruction. But these procedures and methods are still very experimental and not offered in very many places. It's not accessible. And then for the other three challenges, what today do we have to offer? There are literally no FDA-approved drugs that target the lymphatic system specifically. We can do better. So tomorrow, what's Glide going to do? We're going to revolutionize lymphatic medicine with all of your help. So we are going to concentrate on restoring flow through physical interventions. We're going to repair those obstructed lymphatics and improve flow. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but there's lots of different ways, and we're going to hear from some today. But maybe devices, stents, bypassing, artificial valves, neuromodulation, and smart technology for compression that's comfortable. And then for the other three challenges, we're going to normalize function. It might be through a small molecule. It might be through a gene. It might be through cell therapy. But I know out there is someone who's going to be able to do it. You might be able to do it by modulating interstitial fluid production. You might be able to do it by modulating lymphatic contractility, and/or you might be able to stimulate lymphatic growth when we need it, but also make it regress when we don't want it. So the vision, pretty cool. This is what you're all going to help us do. We envision a future where doctors are going to have a therapeutic armamentarium, a group of tools and treatments that are going to improve the life of so many, not just in primary lymphatic diseases, but in common chronic diseases and rare diseases alike. Okay. What's the state of the industry, just to put it in perspective here? Well, we had a group help us figure this out and get us some numbers. Lymphatic dysfunction is truly costly to Americans because we have few therapeutic options and we don't have cures. So let's take a look at this blue box and concentrate on primary lymphatic diseases, lymphatic tumors and malformations, and lymphedema. If you just look at the annual out-of-pocket cost for drugs, do you all see the alpelisib up there? That's a PIK3CA inhibitor that's used for breast cancer. When it was rebranded for vascular overgrowths or lymphatic overgrowths, called PROS, that drug went up in price to $41,000. And then just look at what it costs for a caregiver or a patient who's not well. The out-of-pocket annual cost to that family. It can be over $2.4 billion annually in the US. That's just for primary malformations, and $40 billion for lymphedema. Now let me give you a use case. Let's talk about breast cancer. A recent study showed that if we improved early diagnostics and got treatment to patients that have lymphedema, we could save $10,000 to $20,000 a year for that patient. Now let's take women who are diagnosed with breast cancer. 300,000 women a year are diagnosed. Of those, 30% may survive their cancer, but live with chronic lymphedema, and they go unknown and silent. That's 90,000 women per year suffering with lymphedema. And if we improve the diagnosis, if we improve the treatments, we could be saving $1.8 billion. It's pretty stunning to me. And then we looked at common chronic diseases. And we took just a few, select congestive heart failure, breast cancer, and Alzheimer's disease. Look at the annual cost out of pocket that could be saved. For all these chronic common diseases, if we found treatments that address their lymphatic dysfunction, it might be even a better way to treat these patients. And then we can consider the autoimmune diseases, transplant, type 2 diabetes, obesity. So let me now take you through the state of the art. What do we have as clinicians? And I will share with you, and I'm sure everyone out there that's treating a patient will say, treatment of lymphatic dysfunction comes too little and too late. So here are the stages of lymphatic disease, specifically for lymphedema, let's say. Patient presents healthy. They undergo surgery for breast cancer. Or they're a kid and they have an infection. They get an insult. But not immediately do lymphatic dysfunction sometimes become physical. And so it sits subclinical. Then it gets to stage 1 where they start to have symptoms. Stage 2, it progresses until it becomes morbid like you can't believe, right? So what currently do docs have to treat? Well, we have compression like we talked about. It's palliative and it's poor compliance. We have decompression. We have some experimental treatments in IR and surgery, but they're experimental, invasive, and they may not last long. They're not durable. And then pharmacologic, yep, we have some toxic drugs. We can give a kid a chemotherapeutic targeted drug, but they're on it for a lifelong. And so those dots up there represent the type of tool that we use or the treatment. Look where they intervene. The majority are used when we've already progressed through to irreversible disease. How much better can we do by getting it sooner to them? And so that's what we're hoping with GLIDE. A future where the therapeutic landscape is not just one technology, but there are numerous ones because the diseases are so heterogeneous. So we are going to look for preventative physical interventions that might improve, for example, compression early, comfortable, wearable. It might be that we need physical interventions like IR acutely to directly target the lymphatic system, or drugs that get directly into the lymphatic system and bypass first pass metabolism and all the toxic effects. We could also get targeted pharmacologics, cell and gene therapies. And then finally, for those patients who may be diagnosed later, let's improve the compression and decompression therapies for them so that if someone comes in extremis, we're not using tools that are used for the arteries and veins, but ones that are specific to the lymphatic system. So the future means that those dots are going to be available, those tools, at every stage of a patient's life cycle in lymphatic disease. Okay, we're jumping into the program. We have asked for 2 technical areas, guys. The first one basically is that first challenge of decompressing. We want to restore flow through physical interventions. And then the second technical area is normalizing function through targeted pharmacologic and gene and cell therapies. To jump a little more into these technical areas, in technical area 1, the idea is today compression and decompression are not good enough, and we want to improve that. We've already talked about the current challenges, but what are some of the goals? We want to leverage enabling technology that you would never have thought of. We're hoping that people are coming into the lymphatic space that wouldn't have thought to even use their technology in lymphatics. So maybe that is biomaterials, new surgical approaches for the surgeons out there. How about ways to use LIGHT's imaging diagnostic tools to help inform Glide's therapeutic tools? And with that, we've created very specific metrics that I'll go into in a minute, but we've also given you some potential approaches. Compression, maybe wearable skins, maybe neuromodulation. Decompression, devices to drain the lymphatic system into the venous system by bypassing it better in an IR way, a less invasive way, or novel microsurgical and surgical approaches. For technical area 2, normalizing function. Again, we know the current challenges. There are no FDA-approved drugs. So, what do we want you to do? We want you to target the lymphatic system. And that, again, may be from information from light. Some of those biomarkers that we discover might help you all in improving targets for Glide. And so some of the potential approaches include modulating circulation permeability. It might be modulating contractility. It might be developing neo-vessels, regeneration. We're doing it in other fields. Let's do it in lymphatics. And then finally, addressing genetic dysfunction. We know we're 30 years behind. Light is working on that. And again, I hope that there will be cross collaboration with Light and Glide, that we can target some really important areas and improve lymphatic dysfunction. And maybe with someone's delivery method, it will be improved. Okay. Now, the program structure. You're going to find this one a little novel, and I'm going to explain why. First of all, like all the other programs generally at ARPA-H, this is going to be requested a multidisciplinary team for up to 5 years. We are going to ask that you come in under technical area 1 or technical area 2. Does that mean that you can't have a combined therapy? Not at all. We're looking for combined therapies. But having spoken to the FDA and understanding the FDA rules, which is hard to see down here, but this is in the solicitation, so you have it. The FDA asks, when you are coming in with a combined therapy, that you focus on the one that has the most therapeutic value. So we're going to ask you to do the same when you submit your solution summaries, if that makes sense to everyone. If it's not right, we're going to work with the FDA and you to get it right. But please come in with one technical area that you want to focus on. There are 3 phases. And again, we strategically thought this through after speaking with FDA regulators. We know that it's going to take 5 years normally to even get to something. But we're getting you to do it much faster. So we have allowed phase 1 to be your R&D, and it can be up to 36 months. Phase 2 is set at 18 months for your preclinical work. And phase 3, if you get to phase 3, will be for your phase 0 small clinical feasibility trials, okay? And that's pending approval. So what did we do to help you all out, to give you the time you may need? We've created 2 pathways, and it messed some of us up at ARPA-H with the names because we used activator and accelerator, but we stuck with it. Activators are going to come in self-telling us what technical readiness level you are at. So if you are just at a proof of concept, that's where you're going to come in. Why? Because we want to give you up to 3 years in R&D time. Make sense? The accelerators, however, might have some feasibility, proof of concept, with some commercial kind of inklings. In that case, they might not need 3 years, and you might only need 18 months, which means you can spend more time getting to a phase 0 trial. And we will work with you. Again, the idea is to get you to success. Throughout this program, my team and I, we're going to work with you pretty heavily. We'll want to meet with you. Some in the audience already know, monthly. We want to go through how your progress is, and we're going to work on those metrics and the deliverables. If you're not meeting them, that's okay. We're going to work out how we mitigate them. If you can't get through, we might need to stop the funding, and what those check marks are. And then finally, the last thing that's really important to note is we're asking you to come in with 1 rare disease indication and 1 common chronic disease indication. Why? Because ARPA-H is agnostic, and we want to see these tools translated. The second reason is because FDA regulators gave us advice. We want to see your technology get through. So it might be that going through a rare disease indication is the smart way. It might not be, but at the end of phase 2, you and our team will choose. We're going to choose which indication to move forward with a clinical trial. Okay? I hope it makes sense. So, Glide's team structure, just to review it one more time. Number 1, please select 1 technical area. If you have a combined technical area, okay, but choose the one that's most appropriate, that fits the best therapeutic indication, and come in under that technical area. Choose your path. How ready are you based on your technical readiness level? Are you proof of concept and need 3 years in the first phase? Or are you a little further ahead and have some feasibility? And then finally, define a rare and a common chronic disease indication. Okay, now this one is the most complicated, and once I'm through this one, I'll feel few too, like good. This is our program metrics and overview. Our team worked really hard on this. ARPA-H is not a grant mechanism. It's based on metrics, as Dr. Jenkins explained. It means that we are going to push hard to get results. And our team went out, we looked for all of the evidence, and what we found was that we understand we're asking not just for 1 tool or technology, we're asking for a lot of extensive different ones. And because of that, the metrics are going to be different. Because the lymphatic system is so heterogeneous, our metrics are going to be different. So unlike other programs that may be focused on 1 technology with hard set metrics, we've done it a little differently. We've based it on technical readiness levels. What does that mean? And it is in the solicitation, we have those levels. Technical readiness level 1 are our activators. They're coming in with a proof of concept at a TRL 1. We know that by the end of the phase 2, they're probably just going to get to TRL 5, but that's great. We've done leap years ahead that we can transition your work. And we've given you the time and space to do it successfully. However, if you are a little further ahead, you can come in as an accelerator, which means you spend less time in the R&D and get to a phase 0 clinical trial, maybe clinical trial 1. That one we expect you're going to get to maybe at phase 2, TRL6, TRL7. And if we can get to that clinical trial, maybe even an IND. Now, how did we do the metrics? Each of the technical areas, again, understanding that we're going to have very different metrics for very different disease indications, we did ask for some general specific ones to cover. For example, in physical interventions, we want to know that your technology is devised for the lymphatic system. How about focus? Let's not use devices for other body systems. Let's work on the lymphatic system. We've also asked that by the end, there's 5 adverse events, and that we're working towards minimally or non-invasive. Okay? Now, the next thing, there are 3 steps to your metrics. The first step is we're going to ask you to determine the healthy or therapeutic range of 1 to 2 lymphatic functions. Metrics, okay? And up there, you're going to see in the box, we've given you an example. If you come in with breast cancer-related lymphedema, for example, or someone comes in with heart failure, their functional metrics are going to look different, right? For someone who wants to get rid of lymphedema, for example, they may only need 100 to 250 cc's or mils of fluid to be removed to have some success. In heart failure, it might be more. So we're going to ask you to come in. You've chosen your indication. You provide for us the functional metrics, at least 1 functional metric. More would be better, but we want 1. And then the second part of this is that you include additional metrics specific to your disease for your claim. So for example, for breast cancer, maybe it's skin thickness. But for heart failure, maybe it's central venous pressure. And I hope everyone understands that. Those are the 2 methods of doing your metrics. The third, and then we'll go to technical area 2, sorry. I was going to step 3, but we'll cover the second technical area first. For targeted, for targeted pharmacologic gene and cell therapies, same thing. We have some general requirements, including we want to see a high specificity and selectivity of greater than 90% with your technology. We want to ensure that 45% cumulative dose gets into the lymphatic system in 12 hours. I know you can do it. People are out there working on it. And we want less than 3% adverse events. Then, when we move to step 1, you'll see, again, for breast cancer-related lymphedema, or let's take lymphatic malformation, we want you to choose now 2 functional metrics. And you'll see the list here, and I have one very much highlighted, just to point out why these metrics are so different and not uniform. In breast cancer-related lymphedema, we want more lymphatics. We want more density. But you can imagine in a lymphatic malformation, we want less. Okay, so you come in, you tell us and justify your metrics for your disease indication. And then you come in step 2 and propose another metric specific for your indication. And that might be, again, lesion size for a malformation. Okay, and then the last thing that we're going to request of you, and when I was asked to do it, I was like, what is a targeted product profile? But man, I learned a lot from it. So we will ask of you when you come in for a full proposal to ensure that you have provided a targeted product profile. Why? We want it set up, your vision, and it really helps with the metrics. It helps with the regulation of your technology, and we will work with you throughout the program to improve that TPP and help inform us as we move through the regulatory strategy. Okay, requirements for our performer teams. And you can find that in the ISO in 2.4.1. The team structure. Every team must have a lead principal investigator. Every team we would like to see have a project manager. These are going to be big teams, and you're not going to have time to look after it. Every team should identify a co-investigator with a product development lead. Why? We don't want your technology to sit on the shelf, guys. We are going to do this. We are going to create an ecosystem of tools that will be used for our patients. And then finally, our Discovery Duo program, which I'm super excited to talk to you about. It's the same program for those who have applied to LIGHT. ARPA-H is really focused, and I'm so proud of that, on accessibility, inclusivity, and affordability. If we have technology, it should be for all. So, in order to do that, program managers are tasked with setting up a program or an idea of how to do it. And we came up with our Discovery Duo. Some people like to call it our dynamic duo. We're going to ask each team that comes in, the PI, to identify an early investigator. And we've defined what an early investigator is in the solicitation. And also a patient ambassador, a parent, a caregiver, or a patient. And they are part of your team. And that Discovery Duo will work and come to your meetings, and right from the study design, be able to help you and inform the science and improve the science. They will also sit on what's called an accessibility task force. And later I have, again, the exciting privilege to have some of our team up here to talk more about that. But it's an important part of this. As I sat with performers recently, we talked about how we recruit for clinical trials. And light bulbs came on after working with our accessibility expert when we talked about the fact, and I'm to blame too as an academic, we recruit from our clinic. But is our clinic generalizable to everyone out there in the rural communities? And will our technology work for those patients? That's why technology doesn't. So our accessibility expert's going to work with our Discovery Duo teams and all of you to think of better ways to improve how we get the technology to the people. And this is a very busy slide, but what it does is go over the Discovery Duo program. And I'm going to have some folks come up and talk more about it. But again, early investigator, patient ambassador, forms a team. They're part of an accessibility task force. In the middle, the accessibility task force, you'll see that I have included LIGHT. One of my huge goals and messages to ARPA-H was the importance of bringing LIGHT and GLIDE together. We want healthy competition, but what we need is the best and the brightest working together, because this is so hard. So LIGHT and GLIDE are going to be planned to work together. And we're going to do that by meeting in virtual meetings, in workshops, and through the accessibility task force. And then finally, on the other side of the slide, this just really shows you that we've already been thinking and thoughtful about what our accessibility task force is going to work on. It might include getting out to the rural. It might include insurance coverage for the technology. It might include educating our providers so they recognize lymphedema and bring more providers in to the field. Okay, and the requirements for the accessibility task force, here it will include myself as the program manager and our equity advisor or a accessibility expert who's here today and will give you a nice talk about this. And then each performing team on the task force will include our PI, the project manager, the product development lead, and our discovery duo team. These discovery duos are going to get out and do patient voice sessions. Over the course of 3 years in that first phase, they're going to go to rural centers, maybe virtually, but we're going to do it. They're going to speak to administrators. They're going to speak to patients. And we're going to figure out strategies to make sure that technology gets to everyone. And then I put this slide up because I'm proud of the fact that ARPA-H is helping us build a new ecosystem, a lymphatic medicine ecosystem. And when I pitched this problem, here were the barriers. The red circles indicate the really difficult barriers. That includes early stage science. We didn't have funding. It's underappreciated. We have to repurpose tools to save our patients, and there aren't any FDA pathways. Lack of expertise. We need more in the field. We're excited. We're traveling to some universities tomorrow to get more in the field, so we're going to do it and go out and talk and encourage young people to come into the field. And then the yellow, moderate, awareness of treatment options. Patients don't know. Doctors don't know. How do we get the message out? One of the ways, which I'm excited about and we're going to use, is ARPA-H. For some of the companies out there, for the universities, I highly recommend you look into ARPA-H and maybe consider becoming a spoke. It's a good way to understand what's happening in the community and collaborating. Inadequate coverage. We know we have patient advocates out there fighting for us, but we need to do more by bringing all of the patient advocacy groups together. And what's so cool, and the highlight of all this, is that green one. There's not a lot of IP out there, guys, so you got a great big space to work in. Now, please pull up your phones, and please, if you haven't signed up for the teaming page, go ahead and do it. Teaming is critical. We want the best comprehensive teams, and we're willing to fund them so that we are successful. Finally, this is the last, and then I will be done. You'll see that Light and Glide came very quickly. And thank you to my team, which I would like to call up. I'm blindsiding them here. Jenny, Josh, Maddie, please come up. Yes, come on. Oh, you gotta come up. I'm making them do the dance too. Sorry. So this is just my main team. I would invite everyone up, but it might be half the room here. So thank you to everyone out in the audience who has helped make this a reality. And thank you to these three incredible individuals, because without this team, we wouldn't have 2 programs launched in less than a year. So Dr. Joshua Hooks, Dr. Jenny Gu, and Maddie McQuay, our business financial manager. So they helped really inform and get this all together. They will be part of the team that you see on a regular basis. Our job is to have you be successful. What we want to see, and what this slide represents, is that Light and Glide are going to inform each other. They're sister programs, they're parallel, and what we learn from one, we're going to learn from the other, and vice versa. So we are going to have some cross-pollination. We're going to have some really great opportunities. And you see Operation Bold, that's my team. We're called Team Bold, Biotechnology of Lymphatic Discovery. So thank you, guys. This is a very, very busy slide, but What I wanted to show to all of you, if you follow it along, is the fact that Glide's performers can work on so many cool opportunities. And not only can they identify physical interventions and therapeutics, but at the same time, the pink boxes, they're going to bring light people in. Light biomarkers are going to inform your therapeutics. Light diagnostics are going to help your therapeutics. Therapeutics might help inform your diagnostics. And so while this is crazy busy, these are all the things that we can be doing. And now we have the opportunity to do it. This just shows an example of our discovery duos, and well, they will work in parallel, and they're going to have very specific focuses. Our discovery duos for Light will focus on diagnostic efforts. Our discovery duos for Glide will focus on therapeutic efforts, but together they're going to come together and synergize. We're going to hold a workshop in phase 2 where our Light and Glide discovery duo teams and whoever else would like to come, NIH people listening, we want you to come too. We're going to work on accessibility. We're going to create key performance indicators and a roadmap, a strategic roadmap to get technology out, to convince people that they should bet on our technology for the lymphatic system. Okay, so last thing, lymphatic medicine, guys. I was asked what will be a success in 5 years. Well, I can tell you this is a success now. We're here, we have a platform, and I need all of you to help us spread that platform wide and far and work with us. But in 5 years, we see that we're going to have improved diagnostics and better treatments and prevention for patients not only with primary lymphatic diseases, but common chronic and rare diseases too. And in 10 years, how cool would it be to have a new field in medicine? We should have lymphatic medicine. And part of our routine assessment should be to navigate our lymphatic system. Is it healthy? Or do we need to work on it? So we're going to revolutionize treatment and diagnostics with all of your help. That is Glide. And now I'm very excited to introduce our Business Innovations Division Agreement Officer, Tracy Newsom. Tracy was incredibly responsible for helping us get our solicitations out to you. And she's going to talk all about contracting.
Hi, thank you, Kimberly. Hi, she said I'm Tracy Newsom, and I'm one of the agreements officers in the Business Innovation Division. I'm so excited to be here with you all today to be, part of this inspiring program, this inspiring organization. I have prepared some slides to highlight some elements of the ISO or the Innovative Solutions opening that are not super inspiring, but I hope that you will find them very helpful as you begin the process of submission and selection. So we'll jump right in. The first is that as a result of this ISO, we will be negotiating and awarding cooperative agreements and other transactions with successful proposers. So I realize there's a lot of information on the slide, and because of the time constraints, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Feel free to take a picture or look at this when it is posted later, especially in regard to the paths I've put there for some sample documents for later. So first, cooperative agreements. If you are interested in the federal regulations that shape and dictate, they're very prescriptive, they dictate the terms and conditions of our cooperative agreements, you can check out 45 CFR Part 75 and also is applicable to CFR 200. If you have received financial assistance before, whether from NIH or another member of the HHS family, then you're probably already familiar because these are not specific to ARPA-H. These are HHS specific in Title 45, and 2 CFRs actually applies to the whole federal government. The second bullet is something I wanted to highlight, and Kimberley and Amy touched on this a little bit, but not because substantial involvement itself is unique to ARPA-H with its cooperative agreements, but we're coming to understand that our substantial involvement might be a little bit more substantial than what you're used to in previous or other agencies and their cooperative agreements. So Kimberley already gave some examples. You should expect to be meeting with the project team on a monthly basis. You will likely receive a PowerPoint template at the time of award, and you'll complete that each month, send it to the team in advance, and then you'll meet with the project team on a monthly basis. The other example they shared is that you will have fixed milestones, and they'll likely be tied to your payments. You will be held accountable for them to the extent that you either have to meet them or justify why you didn't. So again, we just want to allow you to manage your expectations so you can plan accordingly with your solution and your level of effort that's associated with your solution. We do think this is part of the secret sauce of the ARPA way, the ARPA model, that this substantial involvement is really key to the success, not only of your individual projects, but the ultimate program. In terms of other transactions agreements, these are technically contracts. They have all the legal elements of a contract. We almost exclusively refer to them as either OTs, OTAs, or agreements, just to distinguish them from FAR procurement contracts, because OTs are not bound by the FAR. They're also not bound by 45 CFR Part 75. So they're much more flexible, and that's why we say that they're much more like commercial contracts. They allow us the flexibility to negotiate terms and conditions far beyond just the price or the scope of work. We can really tailor the awards to align with program requirements and the unique characteristics of your solutions, your individual project. We currently have a term sheet for other transactions on our ARPA-H page. It's under the other transaction community, or the OTC, which is rather clever, right? So that is there at that path. You can download that. That's like a model OT. So it's a starting point of the terms and conditions. And you can see, that's what we would generally start with and then negotiate as appropriate. For the cooperative agreements, we are actively working. Our goal is always to be transparent about what we're doing at ARPA-H, and specifically in bid, what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we're working as quickly as possible to post things so that everyone can see them. I confirmed with our policy team, and they expect to have basically the term sheet for the cooperative agreement posted in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So you should be able to go to the path up there for the cooperative agreements, definitely no later than October 31st. So feel free, if you have any difficulty accessing either document, the OT right away and the cooperative agreement one later, if you have any troubles with that, please send a question to the Glide email box. The final note is that ultimately the award determination is the government's. So there's a variety of factors the government will consider when they make that decision, and one of the big factors will be the award instrument y'all request, but it is ultimately the government's determination. Next, we receive a lot of questions about eligibility, so we wanted to include a slide about it. The first one does not relate so much to questions we've received as the fact that there's been a recent change in ARPA-H policy. So if you had planned to partner with a federally funded research and development center or other government entity, please look at section 3.1.1, because there's a relatively recent ARPA-H policy that prohibits, that's a general prohibition on government entities as part of performer teams. And you would not be wrong if you think in previous solicitations there was variation in language. We, as a new agency, have been working on developing a policy. It has now been signed, and you should be seeing very consistent language in solicitations related to this. The next one is a big foot stomper. If you do not know if you have a SAM registration or if it is active, please check immediately after this event. because it is required for all awardees, the main performer, and the system for award management is entirely independent of ARPA-H. We have no influence on their timelines. So a few nuances here. One is that it is only required for the prime, the performer, and by that we mean the entity who will actually be on the face of the awards. So someone from their organization will sign, and they are receiving the payments. No one else on the team has to be registered. Second, we also receive a lot of questions about PIs and how they can receive awards and how many they can receive at what tier. So we just wanted to clarify, and I think Kimberley already did this as well when she showed some of the key personnel, but PIs are not considered entities who are receiving awards, they're just key personnel. Non-US entities, these rather simple answer is that we can make awards to non-US entities. If you look at the ISO, the language there largely stems from our establishing legislation, which is codified at, in Title 42 of the US Code. So if you want to check it out, I think it is 42 USC 290C, and it says that ARPA-H must prioritize awards to entities who will perform work in the US. So notably, it does not say prioritizing to US firms. It also says that we must, to a reasonable and practical level, encourage non-domestic entities to collaborate with domestic entities. Finally, and this is the most black and white firm requirement, we are prohibited from awarding to any entity at any level in the performer team that was established and organized under a covered foreign country. So you can look at Title 50 of the US Code for the definition of covered foreign countries, but if you had planned to partner with one of those 4 countries, then you probably want to reconsider and please check out the ISO. Finally, and hopefully not controversial at all, is that we can't make awards to any entities that have been debarred or suspended, including key personnel. Okay, now jumping into the selection and submission process itself. So as another foot stomper, want to emphasize that if you hope to be a performer at the end of this in the exciting and inspirational GLIDE program, you must submit a solution summary. It is mandatory. Solution summaries are basically abstracts by another name. Not only must you submit a solution summary, it must be a conforming submission. So that means you need to follow the instructions. The overview of the process is mainly in sections 4 and 5, and the tedious, more logistical details can be found in Appendix A for the solution summaries. So you'll find the page count there, the font, all of the information you need to submit a conforming solution summary. When you have your package, submit it in the ARPA-H solution submission system. And there's a little asterisk there because to be conforming, it must go in the ARPA-H system. You cannot, even if you're requesting a cooperative agreement, nothing should go in grants.gov, even though we will be posting the solicitation there. It must come into the ARPA-H portal. Once we receive your submission, we will review it to determine that it's conforming, and if it is, then it will be independently reviewed within the context of the evaluation criteria, the 4 criteria. And what that means, not intended to be like evasive or vague, but one, the independent part. At no part in this process will your submissions be compared with anyone else's. They will be independently evaluated within the context of or directly against the evaluation criteria. And within the context of is designed to convey that based on the brevity of the solution summaries, we can't perform a formal evaluation against the 4 factors. It will be a review, but there's no new factors or criteria. It's still within the context of those 4 criteria. After the review is complete, you will receive a notification. There are 3 options. So the first would be if your submission was found non-conforming, you will be notified that your submission was non-conforming and it was not eligible for further consideration. So again, please read the ISO and follow the instructions. 2, we would be notified that based on our review, we are encouraging you to proceed to step 2 and submit your solution pitch deck. The third option is that based on our review, we find it highly unlikely that we will fund your solution, so we are discouraging you for spending the time and effort to move on to steps 2 and 3. Regardless of our feedback in terms of whether we encourage or discourage you, you are able to move on to step 2 if you submitted a conforming solution submission package. To do that, you would go to Appendix B, which has some of that same logistical and more tedious, detailed information about how to submit a conforming pitch deck. Once you have it, which will be in line with attachment 2 to the ISO, which we'll discuss in just a minute or two, you'll put it into the ARPA-H solution submission system, where it'll be reviewed to determine that it conforms. If it does, you will receive your date and time for the virtual pitch. The virtual pitch, so this is important when you're developing your pitch deck, as well as when you're practicing, you will be held to a firm 20 minutes. And this includes you walk in the door, or you start the Teams or Zoom meeting, introductions, everything. From the beginning until you're shut off to begin the 10 minutes designated for Q&A. So please keep this in mind when you're practicing and preparing the deck for submission. Once complete, your pitch deck and your pitch itself will be formally evaluated against the evaluation criteria. And at that point, you will receive feedback that you are either invited to submit a full proposal or you are not, and we'll thank you for your effort to this point. If you are invited to submit a full proposal, you will begin that process by following the instructions in Appendix C. Appendix C is quite lengthy, and it provides a lot of instructions related to the submission of the 3-volume full proposal. So once you have that prepared, again, you will submit it in the ARPA-H solution submission system. And here is the only exception to that. Doesn't involve grants.gov, but if you have someone on your team, a team member who is not comfortable sharing their cost and pricing data with you, the spreadsheet itself, they are welcome to submit it directly to the glide at ARPA-H.gov email box, and you would still have a conforming proposal, but that is the only exception to the submission at the ARPA-H portal. Once you've submitted your full proposal, it will again go through a review for conformance. If it is found to be a conforming submission, it will be formally evaluated against all 4 criteria. Again, at that point, and all of these notifications, I should add, will be made as quickly as possible. We know that you will be waiting on edge to hear. This notification will be whether you were selected to move forward with the negotiations to possibly receive funding, or if we're thanking you for your effort, and at this time we do not expect to fund your solution. Okay, the evaluation criteria, which are listed in descending order of importance. I only have a few notes here. Related to criterion 2, we received quite a few questions, and largely they relate to, what if I don't know my project manager yet, or my one of the other key personnel, or my institution, for instance, my university won't even let me post a hiring notice to hire someone unless or until we receive award, or this entity, I know I will need this type of entity in year 4, but we don't know who that is, or we can't get a quote at this time. So there's, areas in both the technical and the cost proposal where you might be kind of weighing that. And the response is kind of a 2-parter. 1, you can't submit something you don't know, and we don't want you to make anything up. That doesn't help us, so don't make up proposal information. But at the same time, our ability to evaluate your proposal is dependent on the level of detail you can provide. That level of detail helps substantiate that you're capable of accomplishing your solution. So it's basically up to you and your team, your professional expertise, to provide whatever information you think is most relevant or that's most helpful to substantiate that you will be able to create this team that will successfully accomplish your solution. And then last, the criterion 4, we also receive lots of questions about program and project budgets. So 1, we will not be releasing the GLIDE budget publicly. And 2, we have not established any ceiling for individual projects and not even a range of project budget estimates. So the values for the cooperative agreements and individual OTs are entirely dependent on the unique solutions that you propose. You're proposing revolutionary science, as Kimberley described, and we would expect that the budget you propose is commensurate with that it's a realistic budget to accomplish that revolutionary science. So, as is stated in the ISO, You are discouraged from trying to underbid or price your solutions lower than is reasonable. Because while we do have an inherent responsibility to award at reasonable prices, that determination is not made exclusive of your solution or scope. It is made within the context and based on your scope and solution. Okay, this is my last slide. Just the main thing is that nothing I've said today or anyone before me or after should be construed as changing the draft ISO. So if you think something any of us have said has contradicted the ISO, please send us an email at the Glide box so that we can address that. The second part of this is we are very aware that the ISO is in a draft stage, and we will be posting the final ISO as quickly as possible. Related to that, I don't think I emphasized it on the selection chart, mainly because we haven't posted them yet, but we know that you are waiting on the attachments that are relevant to all three steps of the submission and selection process. The attachments, like the target product profile and the pitch deck slides themselves. So we are working to get that to you as quickly as possible. Once it is posted, it is binding. None of the draft versions of the ISO apply. The final ISO and the attachments will be binding unless or until it is formally amended via a written amendment, which will be posted. And then the last plug I will make is to second what Kimberley had said about the Doing Business with ARPA-H event. I've tried to go through this very quickly in the interest of time, but we are hoping in BID to provide a lot of valuable information to anyone who's interested. I think it would be helpful, although maybe not in time for a solution summary, it would help with Glide for the rest of the process, as well as if you are interested in partnering with ARPA-H in any other area. So thank you very much.
I am so excited. So part of our Proposers Day is generally we have a guest speaker. Our guest speakers today are very special for a lot of reasons. The most important one is that they represent our patients and the patient's voice. And so I would like to invite up a special friend and mom, a mama advocate, a mama bear, Juliana, and I always mess your last name up, so you'll come say it, okay? Okay, Juliana, I'll call you Dr. Juliana. Okay. Yeah. Okay, you let them know your last name.
It's Juliana Rodrigueri Brito.
There you go. I would not have been able to do that. Okay, so Juliana and I met as moms. And Juliana reached out to, I believe it was Lymphatic Education Research Network. And I got an email saying, would you meet with this mom? And well, I've met with a lot of moms, and it's something we don't want to do. But we're glad we have each other when we find each other. And so Juliana has a young son, who I'm going to let her tell you about, that is living with a rare lymphatic disease. Now, the next guest is my very own son, Michael Alexander Prokopowicz. And am I a proud mom? I can't tell you. This is my why, everyone. Not that Matthew isn't either. Where's Mr. Matthew out there? I have two boys, 14 and 15. Where are you, Maddie? Stand up, Buster. So Matthew is a year younger and has had to deal with being the sibling, but he does it in an incredible way. And Michael was diagnosed at the age of 6 after a year long of people not believing until he got really sick with a rare lymphatic disease. So today we are going to share their stories with you. So with that, Juliana.
So good morning, everybody. I am deeply honored to be here today speaking with you all. Thank you so much to the ARPA-H team for having me and giving me this platform to talk. So a little bit about me. Most and foremost, I'm a mom of a very active, joyful, sweet, and headstrong 80-year-old boy named Nolan, who was diagnosed with generalized lymphatic anomaly a few years ago. And navigating his diagnostic journey, the challenges that come with it, as well as meeting with other families, either on the same or similar paths with other rare conditions, really made me realize the need for more research, advocacy, and information for families. And that inspired me to expand on my genetics biomedical career and become a genetic counselor, where I also had the privilege to conduct research on lymphatic malformations. So I put this picture here because I'm very proud that my son got to walk across stage with me on graduation. And I think it's really fitting since he is the reason I am here today. So our diagnostic journey began when Nolan was about 2 years old. And out of the blue one day, we saw this big swelling the size of a golf ball under his armpit. And after going to different doctors and specialties and different tests, we were referred to the vascular anomalies clinic, which we were very lucky and fortunate to have in the city that we were living in. This is not the case for a lot of families who go through a long process of misdiagnosis before they receive appropriate care. Initially, we received a diagnosis of a bilateral lymphatic lesion in his chest area, kind of close to his lungs. And because of the bilateral nature, there was a suspicion for complex lymphatic anomalies. So a follow-up MRI was scheduled for a week later, and then the world went into lockdown because of COVID. So needless to say, that didn't happen. And now we were faced in a world of uncertainty, both because of COVID and because we had a child who might potentially have this rare medical condition who makes him more susceptible to infections, just as there is people dying because of a virus that we don't understand. So something that was already really scary really became quite overwhelming during that time. It was almost 2 years later that he was able to receive his full body MRI, and he was clinically diagnosed with generalized lymphatic anomaly. I was at home, and a few hours after his MRI, I got an email that his results were ready. So I thought to myself, well, if nobody's calling me, nobody's walking me through this, obviously it's good news, right? Nobody's gonna send me an email about this. So I opened the email, and sure enough, that's maybe where having a little bit too much medical background can make things difficult because you understand what you're saying. So my eyes started to blur, my heart started to race, and I had a panic attack. And it was scary, and this was only 2 days before Christmas. In our distress, like many parents do, when they don't have the support that they need, you turn to the internet. You read the most extreme cases. I thought my child was going to die. And this experience really emphasized the emotional toll the diagnostic journey can take, but also highlighted the importance of sensitive and timely communication in healthcare. When we talked to his doctors, we received reassurances, but we also faced the reality that there were so many unknowns with lymphatic medicine. There were no centralized guidelines, no resources, no FDA-approved treatments. Everything was invasive or experimental. And that's not something you want to put your own child through. And why I remain hopeful about the current developments that are happening, It is also confusing, and it is an immense responsibility to make decisions that can potentially improve the quality of life of your child, but that you don't have enough data to know what are the long-term effects for them. So I'm constantly asking myself, am I making the right choice? There is also the psychological aspect for him. He is young. He started going to these multidisciplinary clinics when he was 2. He has to go through MRIs, which can be really scary for a little kid. He's had his last MRI about 2 years ago, and he still talks about that. We had an appointment last week at the multidisciplinary clinic, and he didn't want to go. He was crying, and when I asked him what was going on, I realized that he thought he was getting an MRI. So see, on his last MRI, when they put the anesthesia on him, he was thrashing and screaming, and me, the person who told him everything was gonna be okay, he was just gonna go night-night and wake up and everything was fine, had to physically almost go on top of him to hold him down. And the first thing he asked me when he woke up after asking for a popsicle was, "Why didn't you help me?" My eye was burning, so the air was going into his eye and it was burning. And he was really scared. And so while all these advancements in diagnosis and treatment are great, it is really something else to put your child through that. And so to navigate this journey, we need more than just hope. We need information and we need better solutions. As parents, it's really crucial for us to have knowledge so that we can be active participants and share in the decision making. And this is where your work becomes crucial. We are deeply impacted by all the research that you do, and we are here to support you, to cheer you, and to express our heartfelt gratitude for the commitment that you have on advancing lymphatic medicine. And it is by understanding what patients and parents face that it helps bridge that gap between research advancements in the technology, but putting that into practical clinical applications, which really is the ultimate goal. If it doesn't make to the clinic, if it's not accessible, then, like Kim said, it's just gonna sit on a shelf. And I wanna share with all of this today, my story, because I want you to remember always the human side behind all the research that you're doing. And it's only through working together, patients, families, researchers, healthcare providers, that we can achieve meaningful progress. So thank you so much for being here, for listening to my story, for whether you're in person or virtually, and thank you so much to your dedication to this field.
Okay, Michael, you ready?
I am.
All right, here we go.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Prokopowicz, age 15, and I'm a sophomore in high school. So when I was around 5 or 6 years old, I got a rash all over my body. And my brother did too, but his went away pretty quickly. I got swelling in my groin, and I couldn't weight bear, but a lot of the doctors said that it would just go away very quickly. We looked all around for a diagnosis, and we got many misdiagnoses such as aplastic anemia, parvovirus, and lupus. There was very little communication with many of the doctors, and thankfully, my parents are both doctors, and they were able to navigate the healthcare system and get me to a doctor named Denise Adams, who was able to diagnose me with KLA. After a full body MRI, we got the diagnosis for Kaposiform lymphangiomatosis, and we were given a 50% survival rate after 5 years. However, thanks to, once again, my parents, amazing, they were able to get me on vincristine, steroids, sirolimus, and my dad actually recommended zoledronate, which ended up basically saving my life. I got to a point where I was stabilized. However, I did have to go through many tests, which, as you can imagine, wasn't very exciting for 9-year-old me. I had to take MRIs, I had many blood tests, I had a TLSO brace for my scoliosis, PFTs, 6-minute walk tests, and I ended up having to be homeschooled because we're worried that I was too immunocompromised to go to real school. However, after a while, I was stabilized. I was living a great life. I mean, I had many of these tests, and I was homeschooled, but I was doing pretty well. COVID hit, and luckily, since I was in homeschool, it didn't really change much for me because I was already at home, and I was stable. And here's me giving actually a presentation just like this when I was, I think, 9. So this was pretty fun. But, however, after me being stable for so many years and we thought I was finally good, I had to go get a spinal fusion. The spinal fusion was massive. It was from T2 to L2. And thankfully, we had a great doctor, Dr. Sponseller, who was able to do the surgery for me. We were very worried that this would destabilize my condition. However, it went fairly well. I had a small D-dimer spike, but it seemed not too bad. However, after a week post-surgery, I had a CSF leak, which was not great. I had to be in Trendelenburg position for about a week. I couldn't really eat. And this was all after I had finally thought that I was going to get back to a normal life. However, thankfully, all the doctors were amazing. They communicated really well to me once I was in this hospital, and I wasn't really scared of much. They told me what was going on, and I was having a great time. But when I first got here, many of these doctors were kind of keeping a lot of stuff from me, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. So going into the surgery, I was very scared. I still get routine tests every 3 to 6 months now, and they've kind of become normal to me. I get them all the time. It's not really hard anymore like they used to be. I get blood tests every 3 to 6 months, and it's going great. Now I'm living a great life with my friends. I have a group of friends from my school, Walter Johnson, and I even play hockey, which my mom is not that excited about, but I do love playing hockey. And I just wanted to end this off by saying the reason why I do all that I do now, why I try so hard to live a normal life, and the reason why I try so hard to get good grades in school and do amazingly is because of all of you researchers. If it weren't for all of you, I wouldn't be here today. And every time I feel like, quitting, I just think back to what all of you guys do for me, and I always try again and get back up. So thank you all.
I am honored to have 2 individuals here who are going to be helping us with our Discovery Duo programs and in inputting into our programs the importance of accessibility, inclusivity, and affordability. And with that, I would like to invite Dr. Vicki Johnson Lawrence from RTI, who's our accessibility expert and who you'll all be working with if you're working with us, and Danielle Leach, who is a cancer moonshot and patient engagement science and engineering technological advisor? Yes. All right, for Patio. Okay, take it away, guys.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here and have an opportunity to talk with you a bit about the ways that the GLIDE program and perhaps more broadly, Operation Bold or Team Bold is upholding the spirit of adoption, affordability, accessibility, and trust in these programs. So I want to give a quick overview of what these terms mean before I move on with the talk. When we talk about accessibility, it doesn't just mean whether someone can get to the clinic, and I think we've heard some of that conversation this morning already. But it means more than that when we talk about geography. It means more than that when we talk about attitudes, behaviors, or beliefs that might stand in the way of someone being willing to try the innovations that you have worked so hard to develop. It's critical to think about the intersection of the patient with the technology and why they might avoid it or why they might otherwise resist it, even if they have a condition that your technology is meant to treat and treat effectively. In thinking about affordability, we understand that to be one of the key barriers that can keep persons from seeking care. So affordability doesn't just mean affordability of the medication itself, but instead getting to the medication, staying on the medication, how long they have to use it, how much they have to use, how persistent or consistently they might need someone else to be there with them in order to use it. These are all components of affordability, and it isn't always considered when we think about our technologies. Adoption is about whether someone will take the time to use the technology, use the innovation. And perhaps I should expand the thinking to include providers. So when you think of your colleagues, what might serve as a barrier to their interest in learning more about it, thinking about how it could be integrated into their practice, or why they might resist the idea, the value proposition of the technology itself. And then trust and transition really, in my opinion, go together. When we talk about trust in this context, it is why we bother to engage or why we bother to believe that it can be beneficial to us. And that definition of trust will always differ based on the relationships between whoever is providing the technology and the person who is intended to use it, think about it, adopt it, or encourage someone else to use it. All of this moves to the spirit of transition, which is the idea, in my opinion, that creation of the technology and use of the technology in the global scale is very complicated. It's never one person or one demographic that you're trying to reach, but instead it's a set. They have their own barriers. They have their own combinations of concerns. And we think about all of that in this space of accessibility, affordability, and trust. So the key activities associated with the discovery duos and in some of the work of the accessibility considerations include the discovery duo existing, the accessibility task force, dissemination and interest holder education. I will flag for you that this is a deliberate substitution of the term stakeholder as you might traditionally know it, but to be interest holder here. And then navigating challenges and seeking opportunities. The discovery duo, as Kim mentioned earlier, includes an early career investigator and then a patient and caregiver or caregiver ambassador. The purpose of this discovery duo is to ensure that there is a space in this innovation process for sharing expertise, for diversifying the perspectives that we think about in the innovation process, and to enhance the validity of the work. I'm an epidemiologist. I'm typically thinking of the world of health equity and inclusion from a study design perspective, as in, we want people to use the things that we make, and we want people to use the findings that we learn from the studies that we do. How can we make that a more inclusive process, and how can that enhance the generalizability or the internal validity of our work? That is where I think the discovery duo will shine, because by having these teams as part of the scientific process from the beginning to the end, it means that you're able to perhaps think about the places where you have discretion and consider what it might mean to be inclusive at that point. And I'll say more to that in a moment. For the discovery duos, there are a series of activities. So the discovery duo is meant to meet regularly. There will also be mentoring for the early stage investigators. This is included in the ISO. And there is an expectation that they will participate in the quarterly accessibility task force. I'll say more about the task force in a moment. But the intent here is that in these meetings, in these conversations, there is an exchange. There is bi-directional communication. So the early stage investigator perhaps is at a point in their careers where they are still able to figure out how to be inclusive in their thinking, inclusive in their scientific discoveries, and inclusive in how that will translate to serving real life populations. This also might be a space where there's an opportunity to think about patient-reported outcomes. That isn't always part of what we think about in these early stages, but you are encouraged to do so here. The discovery duo will also have access to workshops and training. So they will have workshops around research methods. We understand everyone may come from a different discipline or have a different background. There is no expectation that everyone knows everything, but that there will be time for people to be on the same page, learn those skills, and be able to communicate effectively by doing so. There will also be trainings around patient advocacy. In that work, perhaps your patient ambassador is already an advocate. It may be the case that they are learning to advocate with a new audience. So one of the examples that we've talked about is thinking about advocating with insurance agencies, or insurance companies rather. What do these patient advocates and early stage investigators need to know and understand to say when they are engaging in that audience? And then they'll also have opportunities to receive training and communication for all the reasons I've already mentioned. There will be patient caregiver voice sessions. Kim mentioned this earlier, and the slide actually referenced the minority serving institutions as a place where reach outs could happen. The expectation is that there are 50 or at least 50 of these sessions in phase 1. Now, the audience for those voice sessions, yes, includes MSIs, but it can be more expansive to think about other interest holders. Perhaps there are insurers that we need to consider or other agencies that are relevant. There will be more opportunity to discuss what's relevant or the groups that are relevant based on your science as the process unfolds. Now on to the Accessibility Task Force. The mission of that task force is to ensure that all performer teams are consciously and intentionally considering inclusivity, accessibility, and affordability, benefiting diverse populations, so the for all part of ARPA-H work, as they develop therapeutic technologies under Light and Glide programs. And I think you've seen this image already, but the structure includes the administrative team, the principal investigator leadership team, and then working groups. And these working groups, they represent the investigator and the patient ambassador. There's one meant to represent each performer team. And between Light and Glide, the intention is that there is shared learning. So as Kim said earlier, that the diagnostics can inform the therapeutics, and that what we learn from therapeutics can inform future diagnostics. The Accessibility Task Force will meet quarterly, and one of the key activities that will happen each year is to establish KPIs. So while we can always have a task force that does something, what's critical is that we have KPIs that we can turn to and identify that we have met our intentions for that year. Those KPIs will include patient needs and preferences, provider considerations, scientific advancement, and advocacy needs. And we expect that this will change with time. We expect that this will adapt based on what we learn through the works of both GLIDE and the LIGHT programs. Using these KPIs, we will build what we call a roadmap to equity. And in that roadmap, the intention is that we can see a ideally clear path forward for making sure that the program benefits are actually for all where possible. So you've seen this slide earlier, and as Kim mentioned, there's a lot here, but I think it's important to recognize that the intentionality behind this work is that it's all connected and intentioned to lead to benefits in the future for all, as we've been understanding in the ARPA-H model. I also think it's critical to come back to this comment I made earlier about where we have discretion. When we talk about inclusivity and we talk about accessibility, it is sometimes really easy to go with what we have the ready access to. And it is sometimes really easy to go with what we have seen work in the past or whatever group we have the closest reach or connection with. And so my challenge to you as you are doing this work is to think about how that might be more expansive. The demographic of the United States is changing. As it continues to change, the people who we look out and see and how we might categorize them will also change. I'm hoping that the technologies that you develop and the people that you develop them with are representative of the communities where you intend for them to be used. And it is also the case that we are thinking about geography. Rurality might not be changing as much, which means we need to think about how our innovations and technologies are beneficial in multiple settings. Does that mean you need to think about what it takes for a provider in a rural area to use it? Perhaps. Does it mean we need to think about maybe non-traditional hours or non-traditional structures in order to make these innovations useful in other communities? Yes. And the Discovery Duo teams, me included as part of the larger collective in this work, we're happy to help you think about these sorts of issues as the process unfolds. On the right-hand side of the screen are the Accessibility Task Force goals. In that left-hand column, there's a reference to challenges, and in the right-hand column, considerations for solutions. And so I just want to highlight that when we talk about accessibility, you can build that into the target product profiles. When we talk about the fact that research is often isolated and siloed, we have the opportunity to bridge through the Discovery Duos and perhaps through other collaborations between Light and Glide. When we think about insurance coverage, there's opportunity for data collection that helps us build the evidence we need in order to have impact and be convincing and our arguments about why this should be covered and in what ways it will be beneficial. In terms of isolated patients and providers, we know that there are opportunities, and this was mentioned earlier, opportunities to engage with individual people, perhaps in different roles, to understand what their needs are, what their concerns are, and how we can manage them. So that might mean interviews, that might mean focus groups, that might mean other forms of qualitative data collection, but together it helps us to form a realistic picture that we can respond with in the innovations. In terms of bridging the valley of death for lymphatic disease technology, this can involve thinking about different funding sources and thinking about how there are collaborations through workshops across the programs to be beneficial. And then in terms of duplication of efforts, we're sensitive that it isn't the case we want to spend the same resources on the same thing, but finding ways that we can eliminate duplication with the intention of learning more, intention of being more inclusive, intention of being more expansive is key. Finally, I'll comment about areas of consideration when we talk about navigating challenges and opportunities. I've hinted at many of these broadly speaking, but now I'll add some terms to go with it. So the National Academy of Medicine has talked about equity and technology innovation. They use more areas, they have a wider range, but what I'm going to draw your eye to are these key areas of consideration that we are addressing in the GLIDE program and the LIGHT program. The first is topical inclusivity. That means thinking about ideas from multiple spaces, topics that arise from the opinions of multiple people and how they might be relevant for the problems you are trying to solve. Innovator diversity. It means thinking about the performer teams. Is it inclusive? Does it include people who look like the communities where you want to have impact? Do you have people from multiple disciplines? Is it cross-disciplinary? Is there a consideration of how some complementary discipline might benefit your work? Input inclusivity. Considerations about who you collect input from and when. Sometimes when we think about these types of roles, we say we will engage them at this one stage and we will not engage them any earlier or any later. The idea around input inclusivity is that you do this through the process of the research, from beginning to end, not just once and hope for the best. Assessment equity is thinking about how we understand the value of that work. Sometimes our endpoints for defining success with our technology is defined by our own opinions. That's normal. That's what our scientific processes do. But I'm encouraging you to think about who else might have an opinion on defining what works, who else might have an opinion on defining if it's beneficial, and including their voices in the work. And then finally, for utilization equity, we actually want the work to be picked up, but picked up by whom? So to what degree can you think ahead in your scientific development process in order to consider who will utilize what you are developing and what else you may need to do or who you may need to partner with in order for it to be utilized more broadly. Thank you.
Well, since I stand before you in lunch, we'll make this a bit more interactive in the home stretch. How many of you have incorporated patient engagement into your R&D process? Raise your hand. How many of you built the infrastructure from the beginning of your process? Okay, there's no wrong answer, and if you haven't, it's okay. That's what we're here to do to help you be successful. Right now, you were given cards before you came in, and instead of questions, what we want to do, we're going to do a little bit of a snap survey on how you feel about patient engagement. We want you to share 3 words when you think of patient and community engagement. Be real, good, challenging, whatever. 3 words, whatever first 3 words come to your mind. And when you do that, I'm not going to ask you to share that in the interest of time, but if you can drop that card at the table, that would be really helpful because that also gives us a sense of the comfort level around patient engagement moving forward. One of the things that is unique about ARPA-H is that we now have a division called PATIO, and PATIO increases the probability that ARPA-H's funded health technologies will reach the Americans by identifying those barriers and providing the transitions and commercialization services to program managers and performers. Now, it's the first of its kind, and it helps translate those scientific technologies to breakthroughs to deliver impact, and we provide a suite of services to ARPA-H's PM performers to accelerate progress and to accelerate what they can achieve faster. These are the areas in the program life cycle in which our team can be helpful. And success is when these breakthroughs graduate from the agency and can strive in the real world. Now, behind every statistic, every data point is a family and is a community and that is desperately looking for solutions. So one of the ways in which the patio is incorporating that voice of the patient is bringing in a patient engagement team to be part of the patio team to be able to support the performers and the program managers. As Kim said, the Discovery Duo is an incredible, cool opportunity to capture the lived experience in the R&D process. So one of the ways we often hear that all of these different terms, patient engagement, research advocate, patient advocacy organization. We are going to be working with you and the team that is available and working in collaboration with Dr. Johnson Lawrence and Team Bold to identify and work with you to enhance your Discovery Duo team. You've heard those goals outlined by Dr. Johnson Lawrence, and we want to make sure that you're able to optimize and include those that are impacted by the lymphatic diseases and that they have a voice in the R&D process. It is a responsibility we take really, really seriously, and we feel it is critically important that you take it as seriously as we do as moving forward, and we're here to help you. You've probably, are starting to think already, like, who can I ask? What are we doing? But first, before we get there, we're here to help with recruitment of Discovery Duo team members. The GLIDE program team, with the support from the patio team, will work with the performers to help identify potential candidates for Discovery Duo teams. We have and maintain many relationships with the patient advocacy organizations and organizations that potentially look outside the box, as was recommended before, to look for early investigators and potential patient advocates. And to Dr. Johnson Lawrence's point, not everybody's at the same level of engagement or has the expertise or knowledge to level set. So we're here to help with workshops and trainings for the Discovery Duo teams that will help participate in the trainings to ensure that they have the comfort level for that bi-directional engagement and move forward in making that process successful. So I challenge, before we head out of this room, to really think of 3 individual organizations or individuals themselves that could help with the recruitment of your Discovery Duo team. We look forward to working with you to ensure the success of the GLIDE program and to transform the lives of those impacted by the lymphatic disease. With you and your hard work and your collaboration and the inclusion of the lived experience, clinicians will be able to walk into a patient's room and say there is something we can do. Thank you.
Okay, before we go, a few announcements. First one, Danielle just mentioned about patient engagement. And I just learned that we have live on our GLIDE webpage an area now for patient engagement organizations to do a teaming page. So have at it, please sign up. If you're interested in engaging with our researchers, this is an opportunity for you. Again, it's on the GLIDE webpage. If you go to ARPA-H and look at the GLIDE webpage, scroll down, and there's now, under just where there's teaming, there's now a patient engagement teaming section as well, which is pretty cool. And with that, we end our morning session, and we'll see you in the afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone.